Well, good afternoon. I'm Matt Wiener, the Vice Chair and Executive Director of the Administrative Conference of the United States, ACUS for short. Welcome to the fourth and final panel of our symposium on AI in federal agencies, which ACUS has been pleased to co-sponsor with Georgetown's Institute for Technology Law and Policy, Today's panel, like the prior three panels, today's panel will be both recorded and transcribed. The video and transcription will soon be available on the ACUS website. In the first three panels, we largely heard the perspectives of experts outside federal agencies. Today, we'll hear from several innovators and practitioners of AI within federal agents, inside federal agencies. And we're very thankful that Stephen Sanford, Director of the Center for Strategic Foresight at the Government Accountability Office, GAO, has joined us to moderate our discussion today. I'll turn things over to the Institute's Jeff Gary in a minute. I'd first like to thank, though, him and the Institute's Director, Hillary Brill, for co-sponsoring the symposium with ACUS. ACUS attorneys Todd Phillips and Todd Rubin for organizing the symposium so expertly. All of our panelists, of course, and especially our many attendees, 200 today, I'm told, many themselves experts in AI. With that, let me turn it over to you, Jeff, with my thanks once again.
Absolutely, thank you, Matt, and I'd also just like to extend a great thanks to ACUS and especially to Todd Phillips and Todd Rubin, who've been doing just phenomenal work on this, planning even before we switched to a webinar format. Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Gary. I'm a project manager at the Institute for Tech Law and Policy at Georgetown. The Institute is a think tank. It's run through the Law Center. And we focus deeply on some of the cutting edge questions raised by new and emerging technologies. And we've been so pleased that we can be a part of bringing this program to life with ACUS. We believe strongly that as AI and new technologies develop, they bring new opportunities, and we've been able to explore those. But at the same time, we can't dismiss the challenges that these technologies pose to existing social issues, such as systemic racism and discrimination and the lack of social mobility. And I really feel that this series has spread a strong light on really the nuance and the realities of utilizing and engaging with these technologies. And we've had a really strong and open discussion about where things are working and where things are not, and the benefits and challenges faced by agencies. And with that in mind, I'm so glad that our panel today focuses on the realities of the agency's use of these technologies and how they're really grappling with them. We'd love to stay in touch. So please do follow us on Twitter. We're at Georgetown Tech Law, G-Town Tech Law, and visit our website, which is georgetowntech.org, where you can sign up for a newsletter if you want to attend other events like this. On that note, I'm going to turn things over to Steve Sanford, who's going to introduce our panelists and get things moving into the discussion. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you very much, Jeff, for those intro remarks. Very pleased to be here today. My name is Steve Sanford. I am the director of the Center for Strategic Foresight at the U.S. Government Accountability Office. Much like ACUS, we are interested in improving the efficiency and the effectiveness of the federal government. So that's certainly a mission that, as an independent, nonpartisan agency of the legislative branch, we feel very akin to. Very pleased to be joined by the panel today. In my work at GAO, I led GAO's first technology assessment on AI in 2018. I've done some work on deepfakes and am currently working on a program of work related to AI governance. And the Comptroller General is going to convene an expert forum this September, and we'll be subsequently issuing some findings from that work. So we're really excited to be a part of this panel today. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. So I'm going to ask each panelist just to say a few words about themselves. Let's start with Krista, please.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm a director at the Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence, housed within the Technology Transformation Services at GSA. And so because we sit in GSA, we really we have a government-wide focus, and our main mission is to partner with the rest of the federal government and across federal agencies to help accelerate the adoption of artificial intelligence in government agencies. And we do that in a number of ways, both through the sharing of best practices and lessons learned in our federal AI community of practice, and also through direct partnership through our Centers of Excellence program. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Krista. Welcome. Sean, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Khozin. I must highlight the fact that I recently left the federal government. So I believe I'm the only one here who is not currently in federal government. So currently, I'm the global head of data strategy, data science innovation at Johnson & Johnson, Janssen Pharmaceuticals. And a few months ago, before joining J&J, I was at the FDA as Associate Director of the Oncology Center of Excellence, and also as a founding director of Information Exchange and Data Transformation that we launched in 2015 with special authorities from the Department of Health and Human Services as an incubator at the FDA for developing new capabilities in artificial intelligence and other data science related areas. I'm a thoracic oncologist, and I've been doing data science academically and also in the private sector for a number of years, going back to my work prior to joining the FDA. Glad to be part of this conversation.
Thank you, Sean. Kurt, please.
Yes, thank you, Stephen and ACUS and the Institute for having this panel today, and I'm honored to be here. My name is Kurt Glaze. I formerly was an appellate attorney at the Social Security Administration, and now I am a program analyst there with the Analytics Center of Excellence within SSA. I'm also the creator and lead of a decision support application project known as Insight, which is a software product designed to help disability program adjudicators with their adjudication activities at the hearings and appeals levels of adjudication. So thanks again for having me.
And finally, Marco, please.
Hey, my name is Marco Enriquez. I'm a senior applied mathematician in the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. I run the largest analytics program at the SEC that's enterprise-wide. We utilize and evaluate AI technologies in support of the SEC's mission. Also, I'd like to add, thank you to ACUS, and also the views that I'll express today are my own and don't reflect the Commission's. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Appreciate that. I'll add my own disclaimer that any remarks I make today are also my own and don't necessarily reflect the institutional views of GAO. So thank you, Marco, for that reminder. Let's hear next from all of our panelists. I'd like to hear from the Meach series. And if you could tell us a little bit about your organization's journey with AI and machine learning, kind of where you started, where you are now, what specific ways your agency is using AI and machine learning to fulfill its mission. And as you've been going through that, what have been some of the key enablers of success as that journey has been underway? So again, we'll start with Krista, please, if you could do that. And I'd also invite our audience who's listening live, please feel free to post questions during these initial comments from the panelists. We'll do a quick follow-up round after these remarks to answer some of those questions, and then we'll do more questions at the end. But we do want this to be interactive. So if you have any questions as you're hearing from our panelists, please put those forward. So we'll be hearing from each panelist for about 5 minutes. So starting with Krista, thanks.
Great, thanks so much, Stephen. So the Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence and the broader kind of TTS AI portfolio is a very new organization. It was stood up last October, so we're almost a year old in light of the executive order on maintaining American leadership on artificial intelligence. And so we sit in a part of GSA called Technology Transformation Services, whose entire mission is to engage with the rest of the federal government, as I kind of alluded to earlier. So we're not really doing development within GSA's internal programming. We are a program that exists to partner with the rest of the federal government. And so we do that in a number of different ways. And so really the whole genesis of this and why we have an Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence was that agencies are excited. And I think we're about to hear from a group of folks who are going to show you that agencies are already starting to embrace artificial intelligence. And I think that there's a lot of really interesting and engaging use cases around how this technology can really be applied to help agencies meet their mission. But there's a lot of questions about it, right? I think everyone here would agree that AI is not a solved technology, right? You can't just buy one AI and get it out of the box. It's complicated, it's nuanced, and as agencies start thinking about, what are my principal business and mission challenges that I'm trying to meet, how can AI as a technology be used? And if I really want to use artificial intelligence to support my mission, what does that look like? What do I do, right? And so that's why we exist. And part of what we do, right? So part of what we established when we set up this group is a community of practice, because first and foremost, what we know is that we're not in this alone, right? And going off and trying to build individual artificial intelligence systems in a black box is not going to serve anyone. So we wanted to create a space for the federal government to come together. And we do that through a series of webinars. So far, we've led series on acquisition and AI, right? I mean, there are some agencies who are going to develop a lot of this in-house. They've got deep technical staff to be able to do this. But if we're speaking realistically, acquisition and procurement is going to be at least part of an AI solution. So really trying to figure out how can the federal government be smart about what we're buying, right? Is really something that our community wanted to learn about. The other thing that we've done some tech talks, right? We had a PhD computer scientist come in and start talking about how you can start using some open source tools to start playing around with data in your organization. And really, the goal here is to bring people together. And I have just been overwhelmed by the number of people who are just really excited. And they'll say something like, oh, I heard such and such agency come speak to your community. I'm trying to do something similar. Can you connect me, right? So that we can share those lessons learned and share other things, right? Share resources, share tools, share frameworks, right? And our community is incredibly strong. We have almost 1,000 members, and we are less than a year old. And they're really engaged, which I think is incredibly powerful, but also speaks to the demand and the interest in bringing this technology to the table. And to be honest with you, I've just been incredibly impressed by partner groups who have spoken up. And they ask such good questions about things like, how do you do this responsibly? How do we mitigate bias, right? How do we start thinking about privacy when we are building these solutions, right? And I don't know the answer to all of those, right? And really, the community isn't here to solve your problems. The community is here to bring those to light so we can solve them and start addressing them together. The other side of what we do through the Centers of Excellence is we do actually partner, right, one-on-one with agencies. And more broadly, our Centers of Excellence program focuses in 6 different areas. So we have our Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence, which is our newest, but we also have a longstanding Data and Analytics Center of Excellence, infrastructure, cloud, customer experience, and call center modernization, right? And we have kind of this demonstrated history of being able to partner one-on-one, bring in our technical expertise to drive projects. And we engage at an executive level because we know that for these types of projects to really gain traction, to really have the impact that I think that they really should and can have in a way that is meaningful, in a way that is bringing value, in a way that is responsible, you need to have that championship, right? You have to have those leaders stepping up and saying, this is something that is important to our organization, and this is something we want to do, and it's something we want to do well. And that's really where our Centers of Excellence thrive, being able to get in there, roll up our sleeves, and with an organization, speak to their executive leadership and go across the organization to say, we need these partners to come together to actually do an implementation. So I lead one of our engagements with the department, and we're doing some automation and bringing in intelligence to some of the processes that they're looking at kind of in their procurement cycle. So I'll stop there. I know I've taken up a lot of time, but I'm happy to field questions about what we're seeing in the federal landscape. What are some of the common challenges, not just in one specific agency, but across agencies, and where are agencies both finding opportunities and challenges to come together and really make an impact in artificial intelligence adoption.
Great, thank you, Krista. It's remarkable to hear about some of the momentum right now behind AI and the awareness of the issues in the federal space, maybe even just compared to 2 or 3 years ago. It sounds like there's been quite a lot of movement there, and I'm sure we'll come back to some of those issues you've raised. Next, let's hear from Sean, who's seen both the experience of how machine learning is deployed on the federal side with FDA, and then also in the private sector. So, Sean.
Sure. The FDA, when we look at the application of AI and machine learning at the agency, I think one can divided in 3 different categories. There are efforts that are aimed at automating workflows and business processes. So there are a few pilots that when I was at the FDA, I was involved in, and that are being entertained right now. And those are some of the same themes that any organization and any business can take advantage of. And in fact, at J&J, we're currently also applying machine learning and piloting some of these methods in streamlining and potentially automating certain business processes. So that's one category. And the second category is the way that one applies machine learning and AI to analyzing biomedical data assets. For the FDA, that's about improving drugs, biologics, and devices. And for us at J&J, it's about extracting insights from the data that we're generating as part of our trials and development programs. What's interesting is that the FDA in a lot of cases, they've been applying modeling and simulation, and more recently, methods that can be categorized as AI and machine learning in very specific contexts. A good example is pharmacometrics. Pharmacometric review of drugs involves a lot of modeling and simulation, and FDA does have great expertise in that area, and they've been increasingly applying machine learning methods. And again, we are also applying machine learning to a lot of the preclinical discovery work that's being done. For the FDA, there's also the academic component, and there's been several publications. When I was at the FDA, I led several AI efforts on the academic front that produced published academic papers that we felt could advance the priorities of the FDA and the mission of the FDA, and also provide actually insights to industry in terms of the art of the possible in some cases, because FDA is in a very unique position where it has access to essentially all the drugs and biologics that have been ever approved in the United States, and that data can be leveraged in very unique ways, and it's a perfect substrate for AI. And then the third component of that is how the FDA approaches the approval of AI algorithms, and there are several pilots there. For example, CDRH has a pre-certification pilot that addresses that, and there are a number of different programs that are underway. And as many of you may have heard, IFTE also has a technology modernization plan that is aimed at providing a framework for scaling data science and also AI and machine learning across the agency. For Janssen and J&J as a healthcare and biopharmaceutical company, we are incorporating advanced analytics, including machine learning methods, across essentially the entire drug development continuum, and bringing in new talent and building new infrastructure. And that was one of the main reasons that I joined the company, and it's really providing valuable insights in advancing some of our programs, and also providing an opportunity to just ask fundamentally different questions that one typically doesn't ask as part of a traditional drug development paradigm. And these methods do allow researchers and drug developers to really ask fundamentally different questions that without applying such methods, we wouldn't be able to answer.
But once you justify handing them out to law students, you can't justify not handing them out to anyone basically who wants one.
Yes, I'm sorry, was that a question? I heard, I believe I heard a question.
Sure, if that was, might have been, I'm not sure who asked the question. Sean, was that the end of your remarks, Sean?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you very much. Kurt, next from you. You already mentioned a little bit that you're actively deploying some tools in the fulfillment of the mission. So I would love to hear about that.
Sure. So I suppose before I begin, I'll give a little bit of backstory. I started my career as an appellate attorney at SSA for its disability program. And then in 2015, after years of engaging with that program from a purely legal side, I pitched software, a concept for software, and that's now called Insight, and that is my current major project, and I've been working on it in more or less full time since 2015. So some background on Insight is essentially, in a nutshell, it is decision support software, again, designed to provide adjudicators with a series of things. First of all, it reads the text of disability decisions written at the hearing, written or reviewed at the hearing or appeals levels of the disability program. We have multiple levels of adjudicative review. It extracts information from the free text of those decisions, combines it with other information about the case and claim in our current systems, and ultimately offers feedback to adjudicators about potential quality issues that are present on the face of the decision. In addition to that, we offer them contextual reference information, so kind of targeted reference information that is specific and helpful to that claim only. And we also offer them a series of tools that are basically enabled through the information that we extracted upstream. All of this is designed to help adjudicators improve the quality, efficiency, and consistency of our disability decisions in service to the public. So I think to understand the why as to why Insight, we even rolled this out, or why SSA funded the development of Insight, it helps to kind of understand how SSA adjudicated claims prior to Insight. And I think the SSA story pre-Insight is very common among mass scale adjudicative agencies in the federal government. So prior to Insight, the workflows essentially consisted of individual attorneys at either the hearings or appeals levels working individually on a case, preparing a work product, and kind of proactively seeking out, based on their training and experience, the resources they need, looking up the right regulatory or sub-regulatory guidance for the claim, and then passing their completed work product to another lawyer or adjudicator for independent review by them. And if a quality issue was found or additional work needed to occur, that other individual would send it back to the first individual. But so you guys can glean that this was a very manual process, independent action by independent action. So how Insight breaks that paradigm is it intervenes at the individual level to try and proactively bring relevant information to the individual rather than them constantly having to seek out that information. It also, as I said, it's probably, most notable feature is its capacity to potentially flag quality issues that merit further attention by that individual before they push their work product down the line. And as you all can imagine, it is much more inefficient to deal with these quality issues if they're embedded in work products downstream, such as on appeal, or after the work product has been handed off to another staff person, than it is to address them as soon as possible when the worker is right there looking at potentially thousands of pages of evidence in an individual case and trying to digest all of this. So that is the aim of Insight. As you mentioned, Insight is fairly far along. It's not conceptual. We've actually deployed Insight software to all adjudicators and adjudicative staff, by which I mean essentially kind of like law clerks, attorneys who write decisions, or at the appeals level, appellate attorneys who conduct an initial review of an appealed case. We've rolled that software out for use by all attorneys essentially at the hearings and appeals level. And that's been the case since essentially at both those levels since 2018. I'm happy to discuss this later, but we've also conducted several analyses of Insight's impact and business value for Insight's disability program, and have seen some positive results both in improvements to the quality of the decisions, as far as we can tell, but also to the efficiency of adjudication, which at SSA, I can tell you, as such a large body, is extremely important, that we do whatever we can to serve the public efficiently. I think some of the most important success enablers that led to Insight wasn't developed in a vacuum. We benefited at SSA from having an electronic folder system, which some adjudicative bodies are, at more, advanced or less advanced stages. We also had a fairly robust electronic case processing system, and both of these systems upstream were kind of the foundational building blocks upon which Insight could possibly build some of the technologies that it has. SSA is also, in this recent decade, underwent many efforts to globalize data in enterprise data warehouses and otherwise make experimentation more feasible for teams across the agency. So some of those have been major enablers for us that we stood on the shoulders of those to build Insight. So once again, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kurt. Appreciate those remarks. Sounds like we've come a long way in that journey from 2015 and continuing to move forward. Marco, please let's hear from you.
Thank you. Like Kurt, allow me to just maybe give a little bit of background. So my interest in machine learning really just started in graduate school. I have a doctorate in applied mathematics, and the dissertation topic that I chose was in the field of optimal control theory, which is really the precursor to what people call reinforcement learning in kind of the AI community. And when I graduated, I joined industry around the time where big data was the latest buzzword. And it was really an exciting time because everybody was trying to really analyze and parse like hundreds of gigabytes to terabytes of data, and also considering how to apply machine learning algorithms at scale. After a few years in industry, I decided to kind of like steer my career towards civil service, which is how I ended up at the SEC. And at the SEC, my assessment really is that I would say that we're kind of at the tail end of the kind of the proof of concept and kind of prototyping phase for some of our like AI programs. It's really exciting because some of the more successful programs, we're seeing a move to systemize and rapidly deploy these systems at the enterprise scale. Furthermore, our infrastructure, both in terms of compute and also data kind of storage, it's rapidly maturing. At the SEC, we use artificial intelligence technologies for a lot of different applications, and hence it was really important for us to kind of carefully think about these applications and categorize them. So we've come up with 2 course buckets, and it ties to really the algorithm's potential to harm, right, the targets, or so the consequence levels, if you will. So I'm going to discuss those 2 levels. So we're going to talk about the high consequence bucket and the low consequence bucket. With regards to high consequence type models, think of surveillance and risk assessment workflows. So how we find insider traders, or us applying risk assessment algorithms to our registrants. Obviously, if we were careless in how we deployed AI models, so if the AI had some implicit bias, we could cause a lot of reputational harm to someone. And furthermore, we would cause harm to ourselves because we would lose the public's trust, in our ability to really carefully and responsibly use these technologies. With high consequence level algorithms, and I think my colleagues will agree, it's really important to have humans in the loop. I think it's really irresponsible to deploy these systems end to end. So you will not be seeing anytime soon, right, an algorithm that is the judge, jury, and executioner in a lot of these cases. To my knowledge, no AI system is sophisticated enough to understand securities laws. Right, it will not be supplanting our human subject matter experts anytime soon. So for us, especially in this high consequence level kind of bucket, AI is just an extra piece of evidence that a human or humans might use. Furthermore, it's conceivable that there are actually multiple models, right, kind of helping derive insights to support an outcome. Okay. And finally, one thing I kind of wanted to discuss is that with this particular type of task, it's really important when feasible to use explainable AI technologies, right? For us, it's not enough to say, hey, this firm, the model says it's high risk. The lawyers at the SEC will just laugh in my face. What really they need is, right, an explanation, right? Where should I look next to find corroborating evidence? As Krista had said, however, I want to note that right, these technologies are far from solved. In fact, right, in the field of natural language processing, interpretability is very much still an open problem, right? So we have to be careful about our use of these technologies in that space. Nonetheless, we should try if and also evaluate to see if it's appropriate. Finally, I wanted to discuss right, this low consequence bucket. And so you hear about these types of tasks a lot less, simply because it's not really as exciting, right? We kind of are interested in stories about, like, potential future Skynet in the making, and these tasks are not that. But I believe that they're a huge opportunity area. And my research staff and I actually are investing a lot of time here. And really, right, the crux of this is that rote tasks can be automated in part or fully using artificial intelligence. It also is nice because, right, you don't necessarily need to worry about explainable AI or even, right, things being a black box fully, because these tasks, again, are fairly low level and inconsequential that, if you get a few wrong, it's not really that big of a deal. But these tasks, if solved correctly, could save a lot of time. And if you roll up the time saved, that really amounts to millions of dollars, right, across the enterprise. And we're not even going to talk about the intangible benefits here too. And so what's nice about this is, right, at the SEC, really, we consider AI technologies as an enabler, right? So we want to enable staff to do more with less. And really, so these capabilities exactly do just that. And I wanted to push for this idea of the low consequence use cases, because I believe that there will be plenty in every organization, and if you solve them, right, the resource savings can be big. With regards to enablers, I think right, having mature and democratizing computational platforms is important. When I first joined the SEC, you were tied, your compute power was tied to your desktop specs, right? And that is no longer the case. So right now we have the capability to self-service fairly high-powered machines. Even some of them have GPUs enabled, so that we could train models. Also, I think just really bringing the IT division to bear and collaborating with them instead of having an adversarial relationship, and I could discuss more on that later. I think that really transformed our capabilities, and we were able to progress really rapidly as a result. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Marco. Really insightful. I really like the distinction you drew between high consequence and low consequence AI. I think we all have some intuitive understanding that an algorithm designed to make movie recommendations is very different from one that's designed to assist with sentencing in a criminal justice environment. And I think that kind of paradigm is very useful to keep in mind as we all think about this. I wanted to come back to something Krista mentioned in her opening about the level of partnerships and collaboration going on, and maybe drill down a little bit there. Ask where, when you look at the federal space and you see this community coming together that's focused on trying to advance machine learning and AI into mission support, where do you see the greatest traction occurring for partnerships or collaboration? Is it with data sharing? Is it developing principles? Is it actually joint application development? Where's the most traction happening, and what do you think are some of the prospects for future such engagement?
Would you like me to start?
Yes, please, Krista. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I think that there's a lot of collaboration that we're seeing. So I also want to echo your point of Marco, you're calling out of high consequence versus low consequence is so important. And you're right, it's not glamorous, but honestly, that low consequence AI is actually where I think that there is the most opportunity for partnership and collaboration, right? So you can look at this from the perspective of using AI to directly meet your mission. There's a whole lot of functions that happen across many organizations that support mission delivery, right? And so one of the areas that I'm seeing a lot of collaboration across is those mission support areas, right? So procurement, for example, every agency, I don't care who you are, you got a procurement office. Maybe they do things a little bit different, but there's regulation that dictates how procurements happen. And so if one agency has used artificial intelligence or automation to help with a part of that, that's something that can be shared, right? And then I think another big area where we're seeing a lot of opportunity for partnership is in policy and governance models, right? So it's one thing to build an AI solution, right? But I mean, it can't exist in a vacuum, right? There needs to be oversight. There needs to be people looking in on it. There needs to be people monitoring it, saying this is continuing to do what we expect it to do, and meet the need of the organization in a way that is providing value, right? And so I know on projects that I have worked on, I've heard of maybe an organization not working on exactly the same project, but that project that they did that was different prompted them to, I don't know, make a security checklist that is really valuable, right? I'm like, can you share the checklist, right? It's something that can, at a very minimum, inform what we're going to do at this agency, right? Or policy or governance around how are you sharing data? How are you assigning ownership of different data sets, of different data systems, of different models, right? And so that framework for how people are setting this up in their organization is absolutely something that I think can be shared. So I'll stop there. I'm sure the rest of the panel has comments and ideas around that as well.
Yeah, so if I could maybe pivot to Sean and ask Sean to weigh in on this concept of partnerships. And I think you've seen partnerships on, again, through two different lenses in your previous role and your current. But maybe talk a little bit about the nature of the relationship between government entity and the private sector when it comes to some of these things?
Sure. Yeah, I think when it comes to data science and AI, public-private partnerships are a critical component of really starting to understand how to manage the high-risk use cases, but also how to scale some of the existing successes. So when I was at the FDA, working on the incubator I mentioned, Informed, that was really the essence of that was to develop a portfolio of public-private collaborations. So we start to work with a number of startups in this domain, and in fact, published a number of papers on foundational AI research as it pertains to advancing the interests of patients and developing new therapies. And so partnerships are a critical component of that. I wish there were more partnerships, public and private, around data sharing, because I think in a lot of cases we do have the expertise, we do have the technical infrastructure, but the data isn't there. And data sharing among federal agencies, for example, NIH and the FDA, and also in the context of a public-private collaboration enterprise, can be highly beneficial. FDA is engaging in several public-private partnerships, and obviously we all know, we've all heard of things that are happening in the context of COVID-19, developing a vaccine, and the foundation for the NIH has, for example, a public-private collaboration sandbox called Active Consortium, and data sharing is a component of that. But there's another effort. FDA, for example, has been collaborating with a nonprofit organization called Project DataSphere on developing data sharing frameworks. And there's a workshop coming up, I believe, in October that talks about rare cancer registries, sharing data to develop new insights in rare cancers. But we have to think about new ways of scaling responsible sharing of data. What's quite interesting is that there are creative ways that in the past couple of years, federal agencies are thinking about in terms of enabling flow of biomedical data in the evolving digital economy. One of them is the efforts that is being led by the Office of the National Coordinator, basically the body within HHS that's responsible for certifying electronic health records. In 2016, as part of the 21st Century Cures Act, there was a mandate, a directive to ONC, to eliminate what's called information blocking. Electronic health record vendors traditionally did not share the data, even in some cases for patients. It's been very hard to get their own data, and typically, still things are faxed around, and in base case, in the best case scenario, it's put on a CD-ROM. So ONC currently, as part of certification, which will be mandated in January of 2021, will mandate open APIs, where anyone, any individual, can gain access to their own health data, and they can share it with anyone they wish. So putting the patients at the center and in charge of having their own data, so they could share it with researchers, companies, other federal agencies, as they choose. So that is likely going to be transformative. In fact, those APIs have already been incorporated into the Apple Health Kit, which has now a new electronic health record feature, where you are able to extract a lot of the data, your own data, in a structured fashion. So that these policy decisions in combination with new organizational public-private partnerships are already evolving, and I believe are a critical component of really extracting maximal use from existing machine learning methods, and to be able to develop better and more nuanced and more predictive and precise algorithms.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks very much. I wanted to turn to Marco and ask a question on the partnership factor as well. Again, with how you're interacting with the private sector on some of these things. And then also to come back to a point you made, the types of internal partnerships that were required within SEC. You mentioned working with your IT support function on some of this. So if you could address those two, I think that would help folks understand some of the issues too.
Sure. So at the SEC, obviously, we have a lot of registrants, and a lot of them are technologically advanced, and they're looking for some guidance with regards to how they utilize AI. And we often have to walk a really fine line. We are we enforce securities laws. We don't enforce good practices and best practices for AI and ML use. And frankly, again, going back to what Krista said, a lot of these kind of things, concepts in AI, again, still an active area of research, so they're not solved. So it goes back to this notion of it, frankly, really irresponsible for us to try to issue guidance on some things that are not solved, right? But we do try to engage our registrants, and we actually have a financial, it's called FinHub, it's our financial innovation hub. Registrants can request to meet with us to try to present ideas and maybe solicit some feedback. And so that's been actually exceptionally really successful. To echo what Sean said, though, we do have some barriers. So data sharing is still a huge kind of undertaking. In fact, it's virtually non-existent to my knowledge. Furthermore, that's also true. Like Krista, we tried to work with other kind of financial or other agencies just in the financial regulatory domain across the globe. And even in that space, sharing data and sharing code is really difficult. And so we have to kind of get the blessing of a lot of lawyers in succession to even share like slides, for example. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done, and maybe a common MOUs and frameworks to basically facilitate just sharing of information, because I think it really would be to everyone's advantage. And there are a lot of common tasks that we all need to solve. And that's certainly true for the financial services industry. With regards to our IT staff, I will say when I first joined the SEC, it was like guerrilla data science. You just had to install whatever you needed to do, and to install on your computer to just get the job done, right? And because asking IT often meant waiting usually a week or two, which is unacceptable, especially now for those of you guys who've actually coded. You literally type in a command in your computer and it installs instantaneously, right? And so that whole 2 weeks of wait time is just ridiculous. But recently, I would say the last 2 years or so, we started really talking to IT folks and saying, look, we need to come together and come up with a solution, because you guys don't like what's happening, which is basically people circumventing your policies behind your back. We don't like the long times it takes to really install, quite frankly, like common components, right, that data scientists use. So de facto now, we made Python, for example, the primary language for scientific computing at the SEC, which led to a lot of like kind of IT sanctioned support. So now I could actually type, install this module on my computer and have it installed instantaneously. At the same time, we know it's been sanctioned by IT, so they, it's safe and won't violate any sort of security protocols. And I think that that's just a really kind of good example of us just coming to the table, discussing kind of like pain points, and then just trying to see like where can IT really help alleviate these pain points. And so by engaging the business more, I think we have now a really great IT division that I think is making a lot of big strides, again, to facilitate a lot of these data science and AI ML workflows.
Thanks, Marco. There might be some federal agencies that are actually would be envious of a 2-week turnaround for software approval.
I understand.
But everything's a little different depending where you are. I want to come back to something Kurt mentioned earlier. But first, given the time, I want to invite the audience members to attendees. Please submit your questions. If you have questions, we'll try to get to some of those in the last minutes of the webinar. And as you're doing that, as you're composing your questions and sending them in, I wanted to ask Kurt, just to follow up, you had talked about beginning to assess the effectiveness of some of these systems. Could you tell us a little bit about how you're doing, what you learned from the process of evaluating these types of systems?
Yeah, sure. I think I can give, to start, I think it'd be helpful to have a broad overview of how we've attempted to assess and ensure the value and quality of what we're putting out in this system. So first, during the development process, we engage heavily with subject matter expert attorneys in the disability program to design some of the discrete decision support features that we offer through the program and to validate them prior to release. That's normal processes. But once they're released, that then transitions into the evaluation stage, as you mentioned. So some of the studies, I have not personally executed these, but we have statistical staff at SSA who partnered with us to study outcomes of use of our decision support software in disability cases during our phased rollout. So initially, we were a voluntary use product, so kind of a natural experiment as we trained and advertised our product to staff, and they could voluntarily choose to engage with Insight for a period. So we had a kind of natural use and non-use group at scale, and our statisticians, for instance, to measure Insight's impact on case processing efficiency, executed a regression analysis to evaluate, based on our case processing system, the timeliness of case closure when Insight was used, essentially when Insight was used versus not used as part of the workflow. And I wish they were here because they could explain these much more elegantly than I could, but effectively the result was an observed reduction in case processing time, both at the hearings and appeals level. That makes sense to some degree, a modest reduction, because we do offer decision support features that are designed to improve the speed with which they work these cases, but we also offer quality feedback, which of course necessarily entails taking another look, looking back at your work. But net, we saw reductions. So that regression analysis, and it takes a lot of data, a lot of voluntary use data, a lot of non-use data, and a lot of time to partner with folks who aren't necessarily familiar with your product and how it works and how it fits into the business process. So those are large studies. In terms of the quality of decisions, some of the studies we engaged in were evaluating the frequency of Insight covered quality areas, the frequency of quality issues in those Insight covered domains in issued decisions. Again, where Insight was used or not used kind of as a natural experiment by our staff. And again, we saw consistent reductions in Insight covered quality issues in final work products coming out of our disability adjudicators at both levels. We also conducted some in-depth manual case studies of specific quality flags that Insight rolls out, where we had a team of attorneys study actual cases where we raised a given quality flag and actually have eyeballs on all work products, including manual kind of case analyses that were written by our attorneys, basically an across the board look at everything they possibly touched to see how they reacted. Did they catch the issue more or less with Insight's help? How did it affect their ultimate work products in ways that are very difficult to measure through existing structured data sources about our casework? And again, in both of those, we did see improvements in the recognition of quality issues with Insight as an intervention in cases where it raised those flags. So those are some of the studies, and this is, in addition to, many engagements with our users that also go to, as Marco said, kind of intangible value of these products, which are things like the dignitary interests of our claimants, the workflow experience of our staff working these cases. Like what is their day-to-day experience with an assistive tool like Insight versus not? And so we do conduct outreach. We've previously conducted surveys, all sorts of engagement mechanisms to try and get a sense for the reception of our staff and their perception of its value. And you know, so far we've been happy that the feedback has been positive generally. So those are some of the ways.
Thanks, Kurt. One quick follow-up from the audience to you, Kurt, and then I've got another audience question I think we have time for to the whole group. The question to you, Kurt, was some curiosity about what does the Insight tool actually return back to the user? Is it a reading list of things to look at? Is it actually marking up the decision? Is it making alternative text recommendations? What sort of actual product is it delivering back as recommendations?
That's a very good question. I wish I had visuals because this might be a little easier, but it's a web application that essentially, when they kick off or access Insight, it pops up essentially a web browser page that displays quality feedback as line items for the user to review. And I should underscore again that Insight as a decision support product is never the final arbiter of any element of a disability claims adjudication. It is always an advisory service, much like if you had a personal assistant helping you with a case who looked over your draft before you moved it forward, and they offered some, you know, some observations about what they saw. That is exactly what Insight is doing, except at scale. And so it pops up a web application. We provide any quality feedback we have to offer, and there may be none. In fact, in something like 45 to 50% of cases that are sent, we really don't have any substantive quality feedback to provide to the user. Their work product seems, you know, fine as far as Insight can tell. We conduct about in the 30s, about 30 discrete specific analyses of elements of quality. So we are by no means comprehensive in our analysis. But anyway, our feedback is provided to adjudicators, and it's really a jumping off point for further analysis by that adjudicator. They can engage with it. They can think, you know, they can agree, disagree, think that they've covered the issue in rationale or that it's covered by the facts of the case. They can change the decisional language to adapt to the quality issues cited to hopefully remediate it before issuance. But that's where we fit in to the workflow.
That's great. The last question to the group, and actually I'm wondering, Krista, maybe you can just answer this quickly if you can. We got a question from the audience. How are agencies addressing or planning to address ethics in AI? Are there efforts specific on the ethics question?
Yes, so that's a great question, and the answer is yes. So again, ethics is something that is not solved, right? There is not any one single person who says, I know all the things about AI ethics and responsible AI implementation. There's many different groups thinking about this, and in fact, I think every agency who is thinking about AI is starting to think about this. So we actually have a working group as part of our community practice specifically focused on this. We are not policymakers, right? We do not create frameworks, we do not create policy, but we are creating a space where federal government can come together and share the resources they have those tough conversations, and learn from folks who may be a little bit further down the line. For example, the DoD recently released their ethics principles. You've got other organizations and groups of organizations starting to release their ethics principles. So you've got a lot of folks thinking about this. Is there a go-to framework for how to solve AI ethics and responsible AI for your organization? No, but there are a lot of smart people thinking about it.
Great, thank you, Krista. And with that, I see we're at time. I want to thank all of the attendees at today's webinar, and in general, I want to thank ACUS and the Institute for Technology, Law, and Policy at Georgetown for this symposium series. I think we had some fantastic insights from our panelists today. Appreciate their time, and wish everyone well in their machine learning and AI journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.